Hello, everyone. My name is Michaela Wilkes with Liberty Counsel Action. I am joined with Jonathan Alexander, Vice President of Governmental Affairs for Liberty Counsel and Liberty Counsel Action. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Michaela.
Of course. Well, we are officially 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks away from the US election. I can't believe it's almost, 17 days away from one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime. However, we're going to talk all things election of this interview. So let's start off with, according to Arizona Christian University's 2024 pre-election research, 104 million people of faith, including 32 million Christian churchgoers, are projected to not even vote at all in November. Can you kind of explain why this is a mistake and where Christians are going wrong here?
Yeah, it's difficult to see so many Christians sitting out. Understandably, the perspective that you've heard, of course, is trouble with allegiance to party or trouble with allegiance to certain candidates. But voting goes so much more beyond that. If we think even
Mhm.
scripturally of God saying to the prophet Daniel that he raises kings and sets them down, you have to know that God has a way that he wants the world to go. He has a set plan and a set order. And he's at least given us in this country the ability to let our vote reflect that. So we have the opportunity to align ourselves
Yeah.
with God's plan for righteousness and governing the nations. And certainly the vast majority of civilization and countries never had this self determination. They didn't have this opportunity to go to the vote and really direct the path of their country towards God's principles. So Christians in this nation that have the opportunity to do so, November 5th is the day to do so. It's an election season, as you mentioned. There's
Mhm.
already folks going to the polls. And so, it's something to pray through and work through, but activate and really advocate on behalf of God's principles through your vote.
Founder of Liberty Counsel, Matt Staver, says it best as it is our civic duty as Christians to vote. It's one thing to encourage the church and to be the hands and feet of Jesus, but if we're not taking action, then I believe we're sitting on truths as Christians that we have to proclaim. So we just want to encourage everyone listening to this interview that there is no greater time than now to be the church, be the hands and feet of Jesus, and go to the polls in 2 weeks, because we have to instill biblical principles back into our society, in our schools, and in our leadership. So also, we mentioned before this interview that pre-election polls show that the black male voters are actually moving toward voting for Donald Trump. Can you explain this shift in the last couple of weeks or months?
Yeah, it's a shift that really has been occurring for close to a decade now, and certainly during COVID, you saw coming out of COVID a lot of entrepreneurship reignite amongst Black men in particular. The conversations that I have on my group chats are all about building generational wealth and building businesses. And a hindrance to that, a consistent hindrance to stepping out into the marketplace with services or goods, has been the federal government regulations, or in blue states, these regulations that keep business owners from thriving, keep small businesses down with onerous regulations or fees or taxes when you do make a profit. And the conversation that we're having now amongst Black men, especially the entrepreneurs, are realizing that the Republican Party has opened the door for wealth, has opened the door for engaging in the marketplace, and the Democrats, through their regulatory schemes and big government, has stifled that growth. So even just purely from an economical perspective, the vote of Black men in entrepreneuring and business situations has been leaning red. And then you come up with some of these moral issues that we're paying more and more attention to, realizing as we're entering fatherhood and entering into marriage relationships, the things that last, the traditional values that last, and being able to raise a family have been part of the Republican platform up until now. And so, from
Mhm.
both an economic and a moral perspective, it was really a no-brainer to support the Republican Party in this upcoming election. And seeing that trend occur amongst Black men, it isn't surprising, because I think that's where our values often have been stifled by a Democrat Party that has sort of tried to handcuff us to the old way. But we're seeing a new move now, and it's really an encouraging trend that we're seeing amongst African American males.
That is encouraging. Alongside the black male vote, is there another demographic or age group of people that you believe will be key in determining the outcome of this election?
Yeah, so the Hispanic population, of course, that has always been pro family unit. You're seeing their vote. Certainly, the 2022 elections in
Mm,
Florida would have reflected that. You're seeing a lot more folks that are family valued, religious in their convictions, have moral based ways of raising their own family. Realize that the Democrat Party has sold them a bale of goods and can't sustain even what they've promised. And what they've promised really is are things that are antithetical to faith and to family. And so the Hispanic vote is becoming more red, which is encouraging. Uh, Presidential candidate Kamala Harris is on record calling the 18 to 22-year-olds stupid. She's called them
mm,
stupid. I think that demographic is going to react and vote against her. They're a demographic that has at least walked through the last few years of their high school and early years of college in COVID and realized what happens when government gets completely out of control and picks
right.
winners and losers based on its own, random litmus tests and not principles and rights. And so you're going to see a class of individuals between 18 to 22, I think, really come out in support of freedom and fundamental rights. So we'll see that shift. Blacks, Hispanics, young folks, I think, are going to come out in great numbers for common sense American values that the
Yeah.
Republican platform has held on to.
Yes, that I mean, that's so encouraging to see the next generation take hold of voting for their country and being like, no, this isn't just the responsibility of my parents or grandparents. And so, shifting a little bit on the topic of abortion, we've seen that there are a lot of pro-abortion ads in mainstream media. Almost seems like it's really not distracting, but there's a big spotlight on that issue, well over some other issues like our failing economy or open borders. Why do you think abortion is this front and center issue this election?
Yeah, obviously an overreaction to the Dobbs decision, a decision that placed back in the hands of the people and elected representatives the ability to now have pro-life laws and pro-life states. It's an overreaction to that. The Democrat Party that has been bloodthirsty for the abortion,
Mm,
mega giants like Planned Parenthood and NARAL funding almost all of the advertisements that you're seeing. It's something like every 4.5 minutes or every 30 seconds, as it were, you're seeing a pro-abortion ad, which is not where the American people are. Even 73% of Democrats say that they want some sort of restriction on abortions. But, this is what the Democrat Party is doing, really pushing this abortion narrative. And two things are occurring. It's overshadowing a number of other issues that Americans are caring about: the inflation, the cost of housing, cost of living, the crime and violence that the FBI finally has to admit is getting worse, the weaponization of the DOJ against average Americans like parents that are wanting to stand up for their children's rights in schools. There are so many issues that everyday Americans are concerned with, and the Democrats are really just peppering us with this pro-abortion narrative that isn't even reflective of the entire nation. One thing that they do is whenever they mention rights or fundamental rights, they're appealing to sort of the self-interest, saying, "Oh, you have this right, you have this fundamental right," which is really introspective. It's looking at yourself, and of course, everyone wants to stand up for what is so-called fundamental rights, and really the only check against an individual doing that is what God says is right or wrong. So you can say anything is a fundamental right until it goes up against the litmus test of what God has ordered to be good and evil. He's clearly declared murder evil. And so,
mhm.
they're feeding into the selfish appetites when it comes to propping up fundamental rights. That needs to be checked against God's truth. And ultimately, it is Christians that have that standard of truth. It's our ability now to demonstrate that in our personal
Yeah.
lives, but also go to the polls and make sure that's reflected in the leaders that we vote for.
Absolutely. Just like what we were talking about in the beginning of this interview, it is our time to demonstrate, take action. And this is definitely an issue that is very biblical from so many verses of Psalm 139. I think that's why like we have to realize going forward, like we're standing up for truth in the Bible, and that has to translate to our vote in November. So Jonathan, thank you so much for kind of giving a recap, sharing where we're at 2 weeks out. Is there any other message that you would like to share to whether a new or seasoned voter when it comes to getting out and voting?
Well, I think the spirit has to be looking back on the last 3.5 years and not compartmentalizing the American story to the failures of the Biden and Harris administration. This is not what America has been about. Our freedoms, our liberties, the ability to worship God, the ability to raise a family, that's had over a 220-year history, and that's not going to be stopped or curtailed by a bad president. So we have to move past the 3.5 years that we've just had, look forward to the future that America has always promised its citizens, a future of equality, of liberty under the law, and a future that is fueled by our first principles, which was worshiping God and making sure that our duties belong to Him first,
Yeah.
and then our duties to one another as citizens in a common sense, commonwealth living, those principles remaining overall. So I'm excited about the coming election. I'm encouraging our friends to get out there and vote. Bring your family, bring your friends, mail in when you have to. It's an exciting time to take hold once again of the freedoms that we have in this country.
Thank you for that reminder. It is exciting. I think a lot of times around it can be filled with fear of the unknown, but when we trust in God and put our entire hope and future of the country in His hands, we can feel that excitement. We can feel encouraged and just know that with Him, He's not going to fail us, and we still are a nation that is blessed under Him. So thank you, Jonathan, so much. We appreciate your time. And everybody listening, get out and vote, 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 and we'll see you at the polls November 5th.